Welcome to Stay Home for Labour. This is our 18th show, and tonight we're holding a discussion about why Labour lost its red wall seats and what we can do to recapture them. We've got speakers from wall to wall, Doncaster, Rother Valley, Durham Northwest, Workington, Blackpool, Lee, Bolton, Sedgefield, North East Derbyshire. Some of the shows we've had before have extended over an hour long, longer than they should be. So my ambition today is to be tough on anyone who's speaking and to limit them to 2 minutes. I'm going to prove myself today as a top chair, and so that's the rules for today. Anyway, back to the show. And that's about my personal problems. In March, Jon Trickett and Ian Lavery launched a report which called for a radical change in Labour's approach to communities in the north of England. And Jon Trickett has been invited to speak on the show, but unfortunately for us, he has been given a 3-line whip tonight. But kindly, he has sent in a video that tells us exactly what he would have told us anyway. So I've also been told there's some loud bird song in the background, but enjoy it. Don't think of it as a hindrance. So I'm going to play this clip with Jon Trickett explaining all about his report.
I want to talk about the launch we did a while ago of something called Northern Discomfort. I launched it with Ian Lavery, who was my close friend and comrade. Just so we understand what this is if you go back to the last time the Labour Party lost a series of elections, a report was prepared by a right-wing Labour MP, or I regard him as right-wing anyway, called Southern Discomfort. And the idea was that Labour had a problem in the south of England with what they called aspirational voters, the middle class. And Southern Discomfort argued that what you should do is focus everything on winning votes in the south and among aspirational voters. Of course, aspirational voters, so-called, were found elsewhere in the country too. So Southern was the idea that there was a concentration of people in the south, but they also admitted there were such people elsewhere. Well, that's what happened. Blair came along, he adopted the idea, and the truth is that they assumed that working class communities throughout the country, but especially in the north where our heartlands have always been over a century, would vote Labour whatever because working class people had nowhere else to go. I mean, when you think about it, it wasn't great. It wasn't great politics, but the fact is that they did it. They won elections, and there are still people today who think that's the way forward. But look, we feel that is not the way forward, because working class people in our heartland communities, and we've got heartland communities in Hastings, in Hackney, as well as in Hartlepool, those people have walked away. And they've been walking away for 20 years now, to the extent that the party no longer looks as though it's rooted in working class communities. For me, that's a disaster for 2 reasons. One, because you can't win an election if a significant part of our normal voting group has stopped voting Labour. And secondly, and more importantly, you cannot build a socialist society without taking into account of the needs of those communities, and without empowering those communities and releasing them from the problems which so many communities experience. Because communities like those all over the country, but especially in the north, have been held back. They haven't been left behind. They've been held back by a system that doesn't work for poorer people, for manual workers, and for other kinds of working class communities. Now, we know the working class itself has changed, and we'll have to have a debate about that. But that's the situation that's arisen. Now, it's worth looking at the paper which we wrote. It's online, called Northern Discomfort, because we're now saying there's a Northern Discomfort problem for the Labour Party. But it's actually about class, isn't it, when you think about it? It's about class. Now, there's a number of ways of tackling this. And we've come up with a series of proposals, but let me just quickly say, we need a socialist Labour Party capable of speaking about class, not being embarrassed about it. We need a set of policies which work for all the different communities which make up Britain, including those in the north. We are going to have to do major redistribution of wealth and income if we're going to make progress. By the way, we need to do something about the class character of our MPs. I'm not one of those who goes slagging off Labour MPs, but the truth is that the PLP, I think there's only 5 or 6 of us now who were manual workers who were MPs, and I think that's the wrong balance entirely. So we need more MPs coming from local communities, and MPs also accountable to the Labour Party. And obviously we need to strengthen and build on the relationship which we have with the trade union movement. So you'll all have ideas as well. But the first thing is, are you with us in trying to build working class orientated socialism? I hope you are. It's the only way forward. It's the only way to win, actually. And then let's hear how you think we should tackle this issue. Final point, we're now beginning to call ourselves, we're moving on from Northern Discomfort to no holding back. We don't think anybody should be held back. And we're not going to hold back how we speak out. And you know, that's just how it is. So we're going to do a virtual tour, me and Ian and others, of various constituencies up and down the country. If your constituency or you have a group of people or a trade union branch that's interested, we'll come along using Zoom, and we'll do what we can. Here's my final story. Let me just say that I worked as a manual worker for, I think, 12 or 15 years. I never quite remember. In the building industry. It was under Ed Miliband that quite a senior person in the Labour Party said, I would be the last one of my kind, whoever is a member of the shadow cabinet. I don't know whether he meant a left-wing socialist or somebody from my background. I don't know. But anyhow, the point is, I managed to survive a little while. But when Keir took over, I think he reflected on the fact that Ian Lavery and I had been determined in the shadow cabinet to fight for the views which have been expressed in the Brexit referendum by communities that we represented, when we fought hard every single week in shadow cabinet. But the point is this: we were both sacked. But yeah, okay, I'm no longer in the shadow cabinet, but I think being an MP, a backbencher, is a very honourable thing. And I'm looking forward to the fight for socialism and for a working class orientated Labour Party. So, you know what they say, the struggle never ends, and it doesn't. But I'd like to see more people from different backgrounds as MPs on the front bench, in the shadow cabinet, and maybe in due course as leader of the Labour Party, because it is the way forward. It's not simply a backward looking thing to our history, it's the way forward for our country. And look at the situation that this virus has shown, how divided our country is on class terms, but how the people who support the whole of our society in terms of their work, the key workers, are the low paid, often the very working class people that I've just been speaking about. Well, look, I'll be interested to see how this discussion goes, and let's agree to work together to build a better world. And thanks for listening.
Okay, I'm sorry that he couldn't be here, but it's a very good clip that he sent in there, and there's quite a lot that he mentioned. But two issues that came forward for me, one was Brexit. I mean, everyone seemed to think that those seats were lost because of Brexit, solely because of Brexit, because Labour's policy wasn't pro-leave, and lots of those constituencies were. But is it that simple? And the first person I'm going to ask who's come to speak, it's her birthday today. It's a big birthday for her. I'm really pleased she's come, and she's a candidate in North East Derbyshire. Chris, are you there?
I am here, yes. Thanks, Crispin. Thanks for the invite to stay in for Labour.
So Chris, can you tell us, that people sort of simplify it as Labour lost those seats because of Brexit, but what else do you think was at play? What else? What's the other issues? I'm giving you 2 minutes. Okay.
Thank you. So yeah, I was very honoured to be selected as the Labour candidate in North East Derbyshire, and I was selected as part of an early selection because in the 2017 election, whilst we didn't have that disaster that so many people predicted Labour would have, North East Derbyshire was one of the previously safe Labour seats that actually turned Tory back then, it being Labour since 1935. So I had the fortune to actually be able to work in the constituency for almost 2 years before the general election last year was called. And it was quite clear as we were going round listening to people that we'd got a huge job on our hands. And yes, Brexit was an issue. I'll say something very briefly on that in a moment. But it did feel like to me that we had got a huge tanker to turn around in the way that Labour was connecting with people there. And I think it's not something that happened overnight. I think it was something that's been 30 years in the making because of the change that we went through as a party and the change that then followed on with Labour in power, when people in these communities that had the attack that started under Thatcher, and it started with, in those communities, which it is basically a network of ex-mining villages, when that heavy industry was taken away, there was no industrial strategy put in its place. And there wasn't from the previous Labour government, although there were policies to be applauded, we didn't have that change around from what had started. And we always give the blame to the Tories, but the neoliberal policy that started with them actually continued. And the idea of individualism as opposed to collectivism really did shine through. And with that lack of big organised, unionised workplaces, there was a real disconnect. Now, we had very good and strong Labour councils in North East Derbyshire, but obviously add to that austerity that we've had for the last 10 years and their budgets being cut. There was a real battle to actually be able to point to something that people felt linked them back into the Labour Party. It's something that I do feel we've got to be very strong about, because we didn't lose the election because of our socialist policies. And we all need to fight hard to make sure that we don't step back from that. That isn't the reason that we lost. We lost because we lost the disconnect in our workplaces. We lost the disconnect in empowering, as Jon mentioned in his video, empowering our communities to be able to actually have the ability and have the link between socialist policy and their lives. So that was really it. Very briefly on Brexit, yeah, I was representing a Leave voting area. And really, the damage that was done for the messaging on our message, which ended up with a compromise policy, which was very hard to communicate. That really did go against us. But you can't just say it was that Brexit policy that did it.
Right. It was like the final bit that made
it really was, yeah. I mean,
right.
It was to go
Chris,
back.
Chris,
yeah.
I'm being tough now. You've gone over 2 minutes, and it is your birthday, so I gave you another minute. I hope you enjoyed that minute.
Thank you.
I'm going to move on now to Sophie, who was Labour's candidate in Rother Valley.
Yeah, Rother Valley.
Now, what was your experience as a candidate? But also, I've read some of the stuff you've written. You wrote a blog quite recently about the community organising side of things, and what Chris just said about the disconnect. I mean, is that the way forward to make that connection that hasn't been there?
I absolutely think so. So yeah, in Rother Valley, it's similar to what Chris described. So Rother Valley and North East Derbyshire are very close to each other. A series of basically neglected mining towns and villages, been in decline for the past 40 years, basically. I know Zara Sultana got a lot of stick for saying that, but I do think that's how a lot of the local people think, that nothing has changed from government to government and that we actually sold the working class out. I do think we need a fresher Labour Party, one that supports our communities, offers something different, something that's actually life-changing and irreversible if the Tories ever do get back in power after that. I'm sure lots of people on this call probably agree, and I do think we did have that with Jeremy. We did have the right policies, but the media was against us, and if people are looking at their own life experience and evidence from the past 40 years, who are we to come in, in the 6-week campaign period, because that's all I had. I was selected 6 weeks before the general election. It's very hard for us to go and change, generations of thoughts and feelings about us in just a few doorstep conversations. So yeah, recently I wrote an article for the Tribune about community organising. So it's a little bit about how the Labour Party employed community organisers. But I want to talk a bit more broadly about community organising. I really do think it should be our bread and butter. We need to be embedding the movement back into communities. So in Rother Valley, we don't really have a lot of the institutions that used to politicise people back in the day. And I'm not just talking party politics, it's giving people the space to think politically, explore ideas and realise that actually it doesn't have to be like this, we can have more. I'm involved in ACORN, another group called Sheffield Needs a Pay Rise. Please look us up because I haven't got time to go into it here. And we basically just campaign on issues that affect our members, and we're winning. So a few things that we're doing right now is called Taking Back Our Buses, about getting Dan Jarvis to bring our buses back into public control. We've done a campaign called Yes to DSS, and we've won against big banks who were telling landlords not to let to tenants on housing benefit. And I think this shows people, it teaches people about politics, and it shows people that actually we're fighting for you in the here and now, and we can actually make a difference. Politics is far.
Can I just interrupt? Was that missing? Do you think has that been missing in those seats in the north? For a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I mean. People can't see us day to day. That there's the old thing, you only come round at election time. And especially in Rother Valley, no fault on the members at all, but that has been true. And I know Jon Trickett and others have talked about how Labour seems to take the working class vote for granted, that that's all they're ever going to vote for. And we can't think that anymore. But yeah, we just need to embed ourselves and be fighting for people here and now, and realise that politics isn't just elections, and we can engage. The reason why we engage in electoral politics is completely different to the other parties. It's not because, so I've seen a few people commenting, about careerists and wanting our mates to become MPs or wanting ourselves to become MPs. It's not for the money either. It is to implement socialism and create a fairer, more just, more sensible society.
Can I interrupt again? Sorry, because I want to move on, but I just wanted to say you were obviously on the left of the party, a Corbyn supporter. So your policies that you were putting forward were radical, but you didn't have much time in which to get your message across. So what Chris said about trying to turn a tanker all the way round, it was almost like
it's impossible.
You couldn't manage to do that. So it needs a longer term plan.
Yeah, and it can't just be door knocking. That's what I'm saying. We've got to have a presence all year round. We've got to, be in the community centres. We don't really have the miners' welfares. We've got to see what's replaced them and be there. I know a few people have talked about Brexit. You know, I was fully on board with a few others in Ian Lavery and Jon Trickett that we shouldn't have taken this policy of a second referendum, and that was, like you said, the nail in the coffin. It wasn't the only thing. We've got to look deeper, but that was it for a lot of people. You know, time and time again, people said, vote for the Tories. Just this one time, my dad would kill me, but I want Brexit done. But it was really hard for me to get across, like you're saying, that actually I didn't support that position, and I would have supported, you know, not a Tory Brexit, but a sensible Brexit, one that socialists can believe in. But it's impossible in 6 weeks. It's impossible even for Chris, and she had a year and a half. It's completely impossible when we just play in electoral politics. It's got to be widespread in the communities. We've got to see it. We've got to see Labour, not just the Labour Party, just socialist ideas everywhere that you look and turn, and it's got to be undeniably the common sense position.
Right. Okay. So I've got to move on. Thank you, Sophie. Ben, in northwest Durham.
Hiya.
So I mean, you were working with Laura Pidcock, and she was obviously one of our favourite left-wing MPs and candidates. So, you know, it was a big surprise that she didn't win. Is it the same sort of story as we've heard from Chris and Sophie, that the past was too much for a radical agenda to actually turn around and to get that message across? So tell us your experience.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think the point that Sophie just made about people not believing that she had a slightly more, you know, a different position on Brexit, it shows the power of the press. But I mean, and in the 2 minutes I've got, I want to make 2 points basically. So firstly, I want to talk about the people who voted Tory and those who we couldn't persuade to vote. And I think we have to be self-critical, and I think we have to consider whether we really did talk to them. You know, I know we knocked on doors, but did we really get beyond that into the sort of conversations that might have won hearts and minds? Personally, I'm not convinced we did, at least not enough. With Laura's campaign in Northwest Durham, we did have a few open meetings, and they were really good, with the help of CLP activists. But they were bloody difficult meetings, but they were also great because I think people felt like, you know, at last they were being listened to, and we had them in a room. We didn't do enough of that, to be honest, either offline and in the spaces where people felt comfortable. And I suppose this is the second point. We have to change our idea of what campaigning is and look at it through an organising lens. So to me, organising is about opening up the space we have to have those kind of conversations. So, I mean, I would suggest that it could be that rather than having like a national campaign day with a petition and branded placards and the obligatory group photograph, we go into spaces where people are, you know, in community centres, cafes, pubs, football clubs, and we ask people what they want to change. We have those open meetings, but we also have small and kind of maybe difficult conversations. We don't force our agenda down people's throats. We don't do things for them. And at first we just listen. And then gradually we help people organise and win the small things. And then as their confidence grows, the bigger things, until they're the ones in the party who are kind of demanding that we save the local schools, or we stop local hospital closures, or we organise at the factory gate pickets or whatever. But it has to come from them. And to do any of this, I think, you know, we have to get our own house in order. So recently I've been involved with a really positive thing called Don't Leave Organise, with exactly this kind of approach that, you know, it isn't about us, it's about linking the party's grassroots with local communities again. The two things are totally and utterly interlinked. And I think that's really the only way we'll put ourselves in a position to win hearts and minds and win back these seats come the next election.
Oh, thank you very much, and what a great, that was a good 2 minute talk there. Thank you, Ben. I'm going to introduce someone else from Northwest Durham, Vonni.
Hello. Hi, Ben.
We met. I did a show up in Consett.
You did. We may have had a few beers, Crispin.
Well, I don't remember. I was too busy with the show, but you're also in the teachers' union, aren't you? So
I am. Yes, I'm in the National Education Union.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to ask you is what Ben was talking about with connecting with people, and what Sophie mentioned as well. You think that the community organising is key to turning this round. Is that right?
Yeah, I absolutely do, and I will try and only speak for 2 minutes, but people who know me know I do sometimes waffle. So basically, we're gutted in Northwest Durham, and I think that's fair to say. We're absolutely gutted. We lost who we thought was probably one of the best MPs we've ever had. Now, community organising, we've done a lot of reflection before COVID, pre-COVID, and we've done some more during COVID of what we thought went wrong. And I would agree that Brexit was a factor. I would agree that the mainstream media vilifying Corbyn was a factor. But I don't think, like Ben, I agree, I don't think and like Chris, we haven't been connecting with our communities for decades properly. And what we heard on the doors was lots of, you're all the same, we just want Brexit. And when we were saying, but the Labour Party isn't blocking Brexit, we were having that discussion about our compromised policy, which was a compromised policy. You know, we were talking about that on the doors with people, and they just didn't want to listen to us. They liked the 3-word slogan. And a lot of them did say, I'm not voting for Labour this time. You know, we had, you know, to be fair, the Tory MPs only got a majority of 1,144, but that is like going to be a juggernaut to turn around. It is going to be a tanker to turn around. So what we need to do is really, in our opinion, and I'm not just talking for me, I have actually talked to our other activists while I've been doing this, while I've been preparing, is we need to be out in our communities, we need to be visible, and we started to do that before COVID. We started to ask people what their issues were. We changed the focus of our campaigning. During COVID, we're planning on doing some surveys and things, and we're going to try and let our campaigning within the constituency and our interactions with our communities be about what the issues in our communities are. And we're going to let that lead the way. And we don't need nice, glamorous national things. We need to reconnect with the people out there on the street. As well as being a teacher, I also did a stint working in a bar, and during the run-up to the election, I was working behind the bar in a bar in concert. And to put it politely, I wouldn't share most of the things that were said to me about politics across the bar. People in Northwest Durham lost respect for all politics, and they bought into the slogan. They bought into it's a Leave constituency. They bought into it. Where we go from here is it's going to take a lot of hard work, a lot of organising. I agree with Ben with it has to go from that interacting, listening to our communities and acting on what they want us to act on at the grassroots level. And to do that, we need to engage our members. We need more activists out there on the ground. And as a CLP, we need to do that. We need to be more involved. We need to be engaging members. We need to be saying, what can you do to help us? And getting those members out there and being active and interacting with the community and owning the things that we're doing in the community. Lots of us do community activism. We have done for decades. But we don't necessarily do it under the Labour banner. Maybe we should be. Maybe we should be out there saying, yes, I'm a member of the Labour Party and I'm delivering this educational workshop, or I'm running this food bank and I'm a member of the Labour Party. And we need to own that, I think, and we need to be quite proud of the fact that we're the Labour Party without shoving it down people's throats, making it very visible. And I think that's probably a little bit where we went wrong.
All right, well, thank you, Vonni. And I'm going to move on to Paul and Laura in Sedgefield, not far from Northwest Durham. Are you there?
Yeah, we're here. Hello.
Yes. Are you there? Right. Now, obviously, you've just talked to candidates and people working in constituencies with radical left candidates and policies, but they couldn't turn around the vote. Now, you're from Tony Blair's old constituency, and that must have been a Labour, stronghold for him to be, the leader and the Prime Minister, etc. How did that Sedgefield lose itself to the Tories, and what do you think Labour can do to win back Sedgefield?
Do you want to go or shall I go?
I'll let you go.
Okay. We had a bit of a different experience. We had a much bigger swing against Labour here than we did nationally. So obviously Brexit played a part, as well as the things that people have so eloquently outlined earlier on, the community activism, the way that we weren't listening. Now, in our constituency, we were told as members that, you know, well, actually it's the electorate that should make the decision. So as members, our opinion maybe wasn't as important as the electorate, but then the electorate were also told that their opinion didn't matter because we were in a very heavily Leave seat, and our former MP campaigned very, very much for Remain. So it was a very, very strange position we found ourselves in when we had an MP arguing very strongly on the doors for Remain. We said to move on to the NHS, to move on to schools and focus the campaign on that. But he very much wanted to have his own agenda, and we weren't involved in the campaigning at all. What everyone else is saying about community activism and things like that, we've actually seen loads of that recently. And this is like the left, the right, the centre of the party all coming together to help with the COVID-19 crisis. People are really, really becoming community leaders here. And that's what people need to see from the Labour Party. Again, what Vonni said about us taking credit for things, I think that's very important because, you know, we've got Tory MPs around here that are taking credit for the opening of a crisp packet. You know, they will take any sort of credit they can. Whereas we're quite humble about what we do and the community work that we do. And I think sometimes we need to have people speak up on our behalf. So if someone's doing some good work, someone else comes along and says, look at the good work this person is doing, because we've got some great community-based people. And I'll let Laura do on how we move forward.
Yeah, I think I can't really expand too much on what Vonni and Ben have both said, actually. It is the grassroots that really need to make the difference here. When we're knocking on doors and people are saying, oh, you're all the same, and people are sort of minimising the impact that the media have had on that, I don't think we should minimise that. I think we need to recognise that actually the media have a massive part to play with that particular ethos from people. You know, they perpetuate that idea that MPs are all the same because it serves their purpose. So what we need to do is be in our communities and be involved in community groups and organising, and start small and start with the people here locally, so they know that they're being listened to and they've actually got somewhere to go to talk to someone who cares about their problems. When you attach that to the Labour Party, you know, brand or slogan or whatever you will, then people remember that as something that has helped them.
So do you think together that it's possible to win back Sedgefield in the next election? I mean, I'm not asking you to be all like, yeah, whatever, but you know, that's what we all do in these sort of rallies and stuff. But it sounds pretty difficult if people's minds have been turned that much.
I think, like Paul was saying, so today I wrote my campaigns coordinator piece for our newsletter at my officer's report, and actually campaigning in the normal sense, like Ben was saying, it's just not going to cut it anymore. This particular situation we find ourselves in now with COVID is probably one of the best campaigns we've ever had, because it highlights the members of the Labour Party who got into it because they care and want to make a difference, and that is shining through quite a lot here. The COVID groups have just done so much, they've really gone above and beyond. And yes, we don't want to sort of go, hello, we're Labour, we're doing this, but other people sort of feeding into that as well, saying, oh, are you part of the Labour Party? Start that conversation as well. And to see that actually we're not all the same, we're not all hungry for power, and we do just want to make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing I noticed when I've been around the country, is how decent and genuine Labour members are, and people who are doing, you know, they really are the best kind of people you could imagine. If only we could sell ourselves for that. But it seems that some of the people that we've been representing, who've represented us, are not those decent, genuine, caring people. And you know what you're talking about with the COVID thing is a good example. Now I've noticed there's two of you, and you've both had 2 minutes, and just because, but you're on one screen, so it's fair enough. You're
one
aware of
quick
it.
point.
But
Can I make one quick point, Crispin?
one quick point.
One of the things I've noticed is that in our CLP we had a bigger swing against us, and I think one of the problems there was that a lot of the dirty laundry was aired in public. Our MP was very openly against Jeremy Corbyn. He wrote to every constituent saying about how much he wasn't a Jeremy Corbyn supporter, and I think those kind of things, people don't care whether you say I support Jeremy Corbyn or whether you're a big fan of Tony Blair or whatever. People on the outside don't have the time to look into these things. They just see Labour bickering with each other, and those battles need to be internal, and we need to see what connects us as Labour Party members, rather than pushing a certain agenda, certainly externally. Internally, have your arguments and then come out with a unified position, and all of you back it and trust one another, and that's going to be absolutely vital going forward. We can't win without that.
Right, yeah, that's definitely the case that happened in your seat there. Thank you, Paul and Laura. And now I'm going to move on to Cumbria and Emma. Are you there, Emma?
I am. Hello, everyone.
How are you doing?
I'm really good. A little bit sunburned, as you can see.
So you're in the Copeland constituency, which was lost in a by-election. Almost, it's the first. And what was his name again? That guy, the MP who resigned.
Jamie Reid.
Oh yeah, Jamie Reid resigned, and then Labour haven't won back the seat since then. So what? You're a councillor in the county. How do you think people regard the Labour Party in Copeland? How do you think Labour can win back Copeland?
So one of the things for me is absolutely you hit the nail on the head, Paul, about bickering in the party. But not only bickering in the party, is what we do as Labour is we go out and criticise the Tories. Now that's good. The Tories need scrutinised, but actually that's all we did in Copeland. And actually, in my opinion, we need to give solutions. We need to come up with what are we going to do different. Why are the Conservatives not a choice? And I don't think it locally, and you do have to keep this locally as well, because many people feel really far away from the national picture. You know, we're all the way down here, and we have to come up with local solutions. What we also have to do is encourage new, young candidates. And I think John hit on this before about having candidates from all different walks of life. So it doesn't matter whether you're middle class, working class, underclass, you know, end of the day, what matters is you have the values of the Labour Party. Your community comes first. To me, it's community, community, community. Not just because they're the people that you represent and that vote for you, because that's where you live, and these are the people that we need to be able to support. And you hit the nail right on the head, Paul, and when you said about COVID. So in Copeland, the response for COVID has been phenomenal. We've got 22 COVID groups, and there's a lot of Labour supporters and a lot of Labour members in those groups, but I don't see a message from Labour. I don't see a message locally from Labour. What they're doing is criticising, and that's all that people remember. And it does absolutely go back to what Ben was saying about the campaigning. Surgeries are a thing of the past. They're ancient. Nobody wants to go and sit and talk in surgeries. What they want to do is have a pint with you, have a glass of wine, go and play a game of football, you know, go to the, whatever it is, it's about socialising. And that's why we are a socialist party. You know, it's about socialising with the community and finding a common ground with them. And I can tell you, I do really well as a councillor within my ward. And that's because I'll do whatever it takes to support my community, and I'll get that message across. And I think that's really important. But we're only going to win this election if we can encourage candidates that are passionate, hardworking, and really value what we stand for as a party.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear. Good to see you, Emma.
Nice to see you too, Crispin.
All right. And I'm going to bring in Gavin. You there, Gavin?
Hi, Chris.
Gavin's in. You're from Carlisle. You move around the north quite a lot. Where are you now?
I'm in Carlisle at the minute, but I've been
Carlisle now. Right. So what's your take on on Labour in Carlisle, for example? Didn't you campaign in Carlisle in the last election?
Yeah, I tried to campaign in Carlisle in the last election, but the internal bickering was so bad that I gave up and went over to Scarborough and I went down to London for a couple of weeks as well. I went to marginals in different areas because it was that volatile and just ugly here. The local party isn't very cohesive. But I want to talk about Labour as an organisation and what we need to do as an organisation and look at it in the same way as I do when I'm looking at businesses. And so for me, we've got two camps that we need to attract, two camps that are effectively our customers. That's the voters and the members. And those are the two different groups of people that we need to appeal to. And
I just point out, you've only got 2 minutes.
Yeah, but we'll be on. Both of them are. I don't think there's anybody in the Labour Party looking at the user experience from start to finish. So you're an ordinary person. You know a little bit about. You have your opinions on politics. What does that journey look like from that moment to becoming an MP, or from that moment to just voting for Labour? And where along that journey are the pain points? You know, this is something that Labour really needs to do. We need to identify the pain points and the obstacles. It might be that our branding is one of the pain points because of our history or because of the nasty letters our MPs in Sedgefield's putting out there. It's something that we really need to look at.
So you're saying that Labour's not really looking at how it can get new candidates in. And it's not making it easy for people.
I don't think Labour's been able to. I don't think Labour's been able to attract talented candidates at all. Why would a talented candidate make the sort of sacrifices that you need to make to get anywhere within the Labour Party? I mean, you're sacrificing your respect, your time, your status, your money, your dignity. A lot of the times.
Can I? I know you want to read something out, and I can see you looking out there. I just want to get you on this. When you said about Carlisle being difficult, is that one of the reasons why, a kind of reason why you think you can't get the candidates, because of that kind of fractious atmosphere in the party up there?
I've tried to get people to join the Labour Party here, and I've successfully got people to join the Labour Party here. And then when they've went to the meetings, they've felt unwelcome, and then they've stopped going. And this is a story I'm sure is common across the whole of the Labour Party. So identify those pain points. Why did they feel uncomfortable? Why did they stop coming?
That hasn't really been covered in this discussion, but I think there's a lot in what you're saying there, because it isn't it's a bit wacky to become a Labour member and then get active. I mean, if you look at the meetings and stuff, it's a bit difficult. But I've got to move on because I'm looking at the clock and I'm not going to lose this fight to get everyone in. So thank you. Thank you. Mark in Workington man.
How are you doing?
So
you all right, Em?
You all right, Mark?
I'm good, lass. You?
Aye, it's all right.
Good. Listen, the party's got a future there with people like Emma, because they have come in and they've got energy, and we haven't got a Labour MP in the whole of the county, and this has been coming since 1997. We've let people down for 20 years. 20 years we've let them down, and the people locally haven't done anything wrong. They've worked hard, they've come out to the communities, they've worked on behalf of the communities. And at the last election, we got absolutely toshed on the back of Brexit. We got absolutely murdered because a national policy it just did not work. We had a really hard working MP who supported the Labour Party when others didn't. And she had a 4,000 majority. And she got defeated by 4,000 votes. And all we got, when we walked down the street, we knocked on doors, we spoke to our people, who we don't treat with any disrespect, and we got absolutely hammered on the back of Brexit. That and the press on Jeremy Corbyn. So it wasn't just the last 2 years. This has been coming for 20 years now. You know, if you go into Barra, we had a absolutely shocking MP down there, whether you're left, right, centre, whatever. We had a shocking MP in place there. Jamie, you know, he worked hard, but we got battered on national politics at a local level.
So do you agree what's been said earlier about how the maybe the way forward is the community organising?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, it's all been sucked up to the regions, and then from the regions been sucked up to the centre. You see all these suits walking around the central office, and then you see the sort of suits at the regional level as well, and you think, what the hell's going on here? We want people down on the ground, working hard. You know, Paul was hitting it there, the nail on the head there before. As Emma, it's just a continuing story, isn't it? It's the same thing all the time. The people on the floor, on the ground, are fighting on behalf of the communities, and they've been doled out a policy that didn't suit the party. And when they got beat on it, and I voted Remain, and I stood up in the GC and said, the day that you reverse the policy of Brexit is the day that we lose our seat here in Working, and we did.
Right. Now I'm going to move on, Mark, to Ryan. Are you there, Ryan?
Hi. Okay.
So you campaigned in Bolton West, but you're not in Bolton West now. But that's where you were during the campaign. And Bolton lost another seat, didn't they? Was it Bolton North?
Yeah, Bolton North East.
North East, yeah.
David Crosby's seat.
What's your experience? Why do you think Labour is struggling in some of those Lancashire seats? I mean, we're going to have someone from Labour. He can't dial in. So, what's your experience of some of those Lancashire towns?
Yeah, I think it's kind of been said a lot about that we lost our connection with working people, or working class people, should I say? And I think the main theme that runs through that is trust. That we lost their trust. Ultimately, when we reversed our policy to say that we would have another referendum, and we could probably go into the socio-economic reasons as why people voted Brexit, but ultimately they wanted Brexit done, and that got through to people. Whereas our messaging didn't, because it was so convoluted. It was such a hash of policies that it was difficult to then have any rational conversation with people on the doorstep as to what Labour stood for in just last year. Whereas I think in 2017 that it was a lot different, because we could talk about what we were going to do about schools, and what we were going to do about the NHS, and what we're going to do to make sure that local government had the correct amount of funding, the most appropriate amount of funding. And that was all lost because we just kept having to have that conversation about Brexit and a 4-day working week or free internet. And I think for a lot of people, in Bolton, it was quite, we had a particular set of circumstances. We had a very unpopular council at the time. We lost the council actually last year in the local government elections. But we still had an unpopular council in 2017. But yet we were still able to circumnavigate those arguments, because we could talk about other things. Whereas last year, I just don't think that we could. We couldn't cut through. I think that if...
Can I interrupt you just a bit? Do you
sure,
think
go for it.
that it can be turned around if the policies are better, or do you think there's a deeper problem?
I think that there probably is a deeper problem, but we've not got time really to go over that now. I think that we probably have to move on really to some degree. We can build dare I say momentum in the Labour Party for socialism, for proper socialism. But I think that we have to be able to get the trust of ordinary people. I used to work as a shop steward in Sainsbury's, and I always remember that whenever it comes to election time, there'd be about a dozen people that would come to me and say, Ryan, who should I vote for? And that was because they trusted me. They didn't care about the policy. They didn't really look at the policies. They just trusted me because they knew that Ryan was, that they could have that conversation with me, and Ryan would look at those things, and they trusted me to be the shop steward. So when it comes to, general elections, when it comes to the referendum, they asked me what I was voting for, and they followed. And I think that people do that generally. I don't think that they necessarily, not everybody watches PMQs. Most people don't. but they definitely do speak to the family members. They definitely do speak to the colleagues. So I think if we can build momentum within the party, and I think that's going to have to come through as well the trade unions, and get people have lost a lot of respect for trade unions over the last 2 or 3 decades. I think that we can actually reverse that as long as we start having those conversations with people and actually telling people how when we stand together against massive issues, that we can change the world ultimately for the better.
Well, thank you, Ryan. And I'm going to move on to Ian Hodson, who's talking about the trade unions. Ian.
Doing Crispin. You asked me to speak on Blackpool, didn't you, mate?
Yeah, well, but also what Ryan said. I mean, we need to build a movement with trade unions to recapture.
I think the comment he made there about people in the workplace asking people about who they should vote for, I think is absolutely spot on. I mean, that's the way it used to be in my workplace as well. I mean, when we used to have our branch meetings, when we used to talk, on the shop floor, we used to talk about which policies would benefit the people in the workplace. And, we obviously were affiliated to the Labour Party, but we weren't, just promoting the Labour Party because it was the right party to be in. We spoke about the politics and the politics that would benefit us as workers. And I think, as important as it is to talk about community and community organising, if you actually look at where people get their information from, I mean, in most of the workplaces where my members work, they've got Sky News on or BBC News, and they're taking in daily the information that's put in there by normally people who are very, very sympathetic to the neoliberal agenda, very opposed to socialist agenda, not really talking about the interests of working people. And so it's no surprise that working people don't think that the Labour Party represents them. I think, we've just demonstrated that people can be convinced that Brexit is the answer to all of our problems, that Brexit is what's going to change everybody's life, that Brexit is going to deliver an end to the poverty, that's going to end, the fact that, your children can't get jobs or you're unable to get a decent home to live in. Everybody thinks that, when we come out of the European Union, it's going to change everybody's opportunity because suddenly, there's going to be loads of jobs available, there's going to be loads of decent homes available, and they're in for a shock because that's not the reality at all. And when people see that, they'll realise they've been misled and they've been lied to. As it happens, COVID-19 has come at a really, really a good time for the Tories to use it to say, well, the reason why we're having to, put you back in austerity is not because of Brexit, it's not because of the bad decisions that we've made in the last few years, but it's because of the risk, to people's health, and we've had to bail out the economy. But we're nowhere near the £1 trillion that they put into the bankers, who after 12 months of putting that £1 trillion into the bankers was getting £107 million back in bonuses. No, we will be paying for this. We've been bailed out by our own taxes, and we'll be expected to pay all of that money back plus interest. And I think the problem we have now is how do we get this current Labour Party to connect with those working class communities? Well, the only way they're going to do it is to recognise it's not answering questions and sitting on the fence. It's actually explaining to people why politics is important and why it's critical that they take the opportunity when elections take place to take their vote, because it's their families, as we're seeing now. I mean, Harrods isn't going back to school, and there's no issue with teachers at Harrods not being called heroes, is there? Or Eton teachers not being called heroes. It's only working class communities teachers that are being called, out for saying that we need to put. And by the way, all of those teachers have been in work, maybe not every day, maybe on a rota, but all of those teachers have been on the front line, making sure that the key workers in our communities were able to get their kids in school so they could do the job which has been so important to people. It's been critical. And also, while we're while we're on, I hear Priti Patel's now thinking of saying that, porters and cleaners and care workers, if they've lost loved ones, their families can stay here. Well, actually, our members have been feeding Britain. If it wasn't for our members, most of you would be starving now or going out and killing your own. Now, some that might come easy to, but others you may have a difficulty with that. But the reality is, we shouldn't be putting migrant against migrant, saying these ones are okay and these ones are not. And that's for the Labour Party to make that very, very clear. Not go back to, migration and tackling the issues of immigration on mugs, but making it very clear, that working class people, that stand in solidarity win. And we've proved that throughout our history. And I think that's the message we need to get into the Labour Party. If they really want to make a difference in these communities and talk the language of the people on the shop floor, then it's listening to the issues they face and the reasons why they make the decisions they make. And at the moment, despite all of those promises that were made that really nobody got to hear, which now we're hearing about, aren't we? We're hearing about, there's about more bank holidays because it boosts the economy. We're hearing about free internet because people need the internet during this crisis, and apparently it's all affordable now.
So you're saying, Ian, that the COVID situation is actually a kind of choice for people, that Labour's got to make a big stand on this, and maybe those seats in the north could be re-won on the back of fighting for working people in those towns.
I absolutely do. I mean, you look at what we did.
Hold on, Ian. I've got a rule that I'm only giving people 2 minutes, and you're a formidable character, and it's hard to
don't ask me questions then.
Get you to stay to 2. I've given you 3 or 4 there, but you're a good guy, and even though it's not your birthday, Chris Peace didn't get 4 minutes. But anyway, I'm going to move on. Thank you, Ian. Tosh.
Yes.
Tosh. Now,
yeah.
What's your take? Because you were warning about the Brexit policy before it happened, but also in Doncaster. What do you think the future is with the COVID fallout from that? And how do you think Labour can recapture Doncaster?
Well, I'll try and be as quick as I can, and my language might get a bit industrial. But first of all, with COVID thing, I think, as other people have said, it's bringing a lot of good stuff out in people and bringing communities together. Now, I also want to make a point that, with the exception of Jeremy Corbyn, pretty much every Labour leader hasn't been particularly my first choice. The one we've got now isn't. But I have never worked against any of those Labour leaders. I am finding it very difficult now. But I think we can win the heartlands back. With Jon Trickett, good comrade of mine, we used to do a thing called Winning Labour. And I remember John saying then, we might not be able to win with just the Labour heartlands, but we can't win without them. And that's as true today as it was then. Now, I think if we're going to win the heartlands back, the first thing that Keir Starmer's got to do is apologise for his Brexit policy. That Brexit policy destroyed us in the heartlands. No ifs, no buts. 2017, we almost won with a clear policy of respecting the vote, respecting what was there. I think Keir Starmer has got to give something to the other side of the party if he wants unity. I don't expect everything, but I expect something. I think the shadow cabinet we've got now is the most factious shadow cabinet I've ever seen. I think we've got some real issues there. And if David Evans, I think, is being tipped and promoted by the leader as being the next General Secretary, that is a very hard right. He's not centre-left, he's not soft-left. Is a hard right person to become the General Secretary. And the leadership of the party seems to be getting further and further away from what the heartlands of Britain, Labour heartlands, want. And what will happen to heartlands if we don't come together, and we need some movement from Keir Starmer, if we don't come together, the northern heartlands of Britain will end up like Scotland has now. And I remember Labour leadership, prominent, high-profile MPs in the Labour Party, in New Labour, when questioned about what about the working class, would say they've got nowhere else to go. We've seen now they have got somewhere else to go. In Doncaster, where I am, we had 3 Labour MPs, we're down to 2. We would have been down to 1 if it weren't for the Brexit Party stealing 500 votes from the Tories in my own constituency, Doncaster Central. We've got to come and get things right now. Also, in that shadow cabinet, you have to understand what the mining communities are like and the passion. Google and look what happened at Goldthorpe, just outside Doncaster, when Thatcher died. We hated the woman, hated it. It's not just a joke when I say it. We really hated her. And they burnt an effigy over them. They had it going down the street in the village. The whole village were out. We hate them Tories. So for us, our people to start voting for Tories shows how something was very, very wrong in Labour. We know what it's been because of the leaks and stuff. We know what a lot of it was and working against it. But the miners and what happened to the miners will never be forgotten. There might not be any miners left. Those that are left are getting older, but there's sons and there's daughters, there's granddaughters and grandsons, all wearing that on the T-shirts at Durham when you go there and saying proud of it, proud of that history that's been pushed down us. And when we get somebody like Lord Falconer being put in shadow cabinet, Lord Falconer in 2005, on the 20th anniversary of the miners' strike, there was an early day motion about his actions during miners' strike. He worked for McGregor in the coal board, helped set up the UDM, the Scab Union. Putting him in shadow cabinet is not going to win Northern Heartland back. And it's time they started to do what they need to do. David Jones and Joe Green, two lads killed on picket lines. Every year that's commemorated in Barnsley. And I suggest Keir Starmer and people come and have a look at the passion and the feeling that's there. Because the Northern Heartlands are going to end up like Scotland if we're not careful. But it can be turned round. But let's see something from Starmer. Let's see something from him. Let's try and get a more balanced shadow cabinet. Let's try and get people who will work and will appeal to all wings at party. Said, I've never worked against the leader yet. I'm finding it difficult now, and I'm asking him, come on, let's play a game. Let's try and unite the party. But it needs to be done from top as well, not just about getting us to follow and do what they say. Brexit is massive, a massive thing. We were being called racists. We were being called idiots, stupid. And this was for good Labour Party members who have seen in these areas. They might have seen big infrastructure coming in, funded by the EU. But this stuff were being done by workers who come in on a bus, in a minibus on a Monday, and left again on a Friday. There were nothing coming into the economy from it. Have I had me 2 minutes yet, or can I keep ranting?
I was just thinking that maybe you might have had more than 2 minutes. But I like your passion, and obviously and what you're describing is that disconnect between the suits and the actual communities, which is what we've heard.
What I have to say is one thing I know.
Start again.
Did you see them all start wearing blue suits? The blue suits started popping up all over the party, light blue suits. That was sign, I think. That was the uniform. They were organising against the working class then.
All right. Thank you, Tosh. Now I'm going to end the discussion with a different angle from an academic who has looked at the results from 2019 and has come up with some ideas about what's happened there and also where Labour may go forward from here. So he's a Labour member in Oxford. So he's in the right party. So don't stop having to go at people for being academics. Danny.
Hi there.
Tell us, because you've heard everyone saying the disconnect between the party centrally and the communities, and also how hard it was to try and turn that around. But you don't seem to think it's such a bad picture for Labour in the heartland. So do you want to tell people what your view is on this?
Yeah, I'd started writing down how much I'd agreed with, by the way, all the start from John saying we don't have enough candidates who are working class or local, the disconnect and so on. But there's so many people, and I agree with a lot of it, particularly Ryan, about how just most people aren't bothered. You can so easily forget. You've always just got to remember further people don't vote. So the passion you've got here is the very opposite to the population as a whole. And it's easy to forget that. What I was thinking when I was listening to you, it's 5 months since that election and you're down in the dumps and you're thinking partly, what did we do wrong? What did the regional party do wrong? Try and imagine 5 months after 2017. Imagine if we had Zoom then, which we didn't. Right? After 2017, what would the discussion be like? It'll be, look how brilliantly we did. the biggest rise in voting ever, bigger than 45 in 2 years. It'll be, look at our community organising, look at how we knocked on doors, look at what a great set of candidates we got in. Even somebody who'd been in for 6 weeks did really well. Look how our position on Brexit was really good in 2017. The public didn't have a clue what it was, right? You'll be having completely the different conversation if you'd done this after the 2017 election to after this one. It makes sense to blame yourselves, but this was a national swing with very little variation. What happened was that 2 million Labour voters didn't vote Labour. They didn't vote Tory. You just don't do that. Hardly anybody who votes Labour one election votes Tory the next. What they did is didn't vote. That's how Labour lost. And you can argue about why people didn't vote and who persuaded people not to vote. I'll never forget one man I know telling me after the 2019 election, I didn't vote Labour for the first time in my life. I didn't vote Labour for the first time in my life because of that Jeremy Corbyn. And I said to him, how did you vote in 2017? He said, I voted Labour, of course. Well, I didn't say to him, you do know who's leader, right? People can be manipulated. I gave you a picture.
Yeah, I've got it. I've got
a picture. Try and explain part of my optimism, but you shout me down.
I'll show everyone the picture that you sent me. It's here.
All right, this was partly a little quiz that I sent to Crispin because he does these quizzes that are impossible. Those 4 seats to the right, Liverpool, Bolton, Castle Point, Twickenham and Brighton Pavilion.
On the left, you mean?
Sorry, oh yeah, on the left way round. They're the 4 seats in which Labour do best, the Tories do best. That's Castle Point. Worth asking why Labour don't do well down there. Twickenham's Liberals and Brighton is the Greens. Now the red coloured areas are in the 20% most deprived. This is last year's data and the Atlas of Inequality. The blue areas are in the 20% least deprived. And so I'm not telling you anything you don't know. A really strong seat for Labour like Liverpool, Walton, it's just red, or areas which are average. Castle Point, that the Tories do well in, has some red in it, but more blue. By the way, these blobs of areas have the same population. They look bigger because they've got more land in them. Liberals are posh, so Twickenham's posh. You always know Liberals are Tories. There's a slightly different kind of Tory. And the Greens, they're Tories on bikes, so Brighton's posh, right? And I'm just trying to show you 4 seats, posh and poor areas. The other 4 seats, the ones on the other side, I'm dyslexic, I always get my left and right wrong. Dudley North, Basset Law, Great Grimsby and Rother Valley are the 4 seats that the Telegraph newspaper put up in kind of celebration to say how well Boris had done because of these huge swings in these 4 seats. Now look at them. All 4 of those seats, I didn't pick them, the Telegraph picked them. All 4 have got 3 large neighbourhoods coloured blue. That's in the 5th least deprived of the country. What's happening? We've got the candidate for Rother Valley here, right? Actually, for Rother Valley, if you look carefully, it's 5 areas of equal population coloured blue. What part? 2 things will be going on at least in some of these northern seats. And these are northern, more suburban seats. They all had a Tory neighbour, almost all that shifted. Retirement migration of people back with cash. They was not the poorest areas. We have an idea of Grimsby, which is not what the current Grimsby is. People in the red areas in their seats didn't vote like they'd voted before. People in the blue areas voted Tory. The other thing really worth saying is that these seats have all been getting older. The young have been leaving because there haven't been opportunities. The seats have been getting older, people have been getting older in them, and some people who made some money in the south but came from the north often originally went back. The biggest cleavage in the last election was about age. Age is what predicted how people voted more than anything else. It wasn't Brexit. And it's hard to explain this, but in the north, you had more people who didn't vote in the referendum, didn't care. And it comes back to this not caring thing. 52% of Leave voters live in the south of England, with less than 50% of the electorate. And the last thing, because I know I'm at the end of it, if you draw your map a bit differently, the map along the bottom is differently. You can still trace a red wall if you want to do it, right? So it's not completely gone. It was a national swing. It happened everywhere, slightly differently. People were told Corbyn is traitorous, Corbyn supports terrorism, Corbyn is anti-Semitic, the Labour Party is dangerous, right? It was, and beating yourselves up that why didn't you do more doesn't help. And of course the regional parties was in an awful state. You shouldn't have candidates who are just parachuted in. Should have been there for years beforehand, should be coming local, should be well connected, and campaigning does matter. But I honestly don't think beating yourself up helps too much. You've got to fight to try to win, but these are the most likely seats to come back, because the disappointment when the new railway line doesn't appear, when all the things that you're promised do not appear, the disappointment will be enormous. Those 40 new hospitals, some of them are going to be very small. Some of them are Nightingale hospitals which have had no patients at all. But they're not going to be in the north because that's not where the population growth has been. So I just think it is too easy.
You've gone over your 2 minutes. I mean, I've given you 2 minutes there. That's
I have got go on.
What I wanted to say, because we spoke a bit earlier, is that you think that on the back, that most of those seats, you said a lot of those seats are suburban. There's a lot of suburban housing. There's a lot of older people who voted Tory, and the Labour vote didn't come out. So if Labour were to connect more with its own vote and get them to turn out more than they did in the last election, but also those suburban home-owning Tories will start to feel the pain probably from this COVID situation. And like you say, so that there is a potential for Labour to recapture those seats, but it would require work on the ground, as has been spoken about, but also to have policies that are progressive about how we can get out of this situation with the disaster that's going to happen.
And policies that are not just attractive to younger people. Labour policies were incredibly attractive to younger people, including lots of younger people who were born in the north but had moved to the big cities of the north away from these areas, or had moved south. One reason why London had such a high Labour vote was that there were lots of northerners in London who went to London because they couldn't get a job in Rother Valley. It is partly that's what's going on. But older people also protecting their house prices, which of course with COVID, exactly what is your house worth now?